and that the quorum call be lifted.
Ordered.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I want to first join with the many senators today who have strongly condemned the violent attacks against the men and women serving bravely in our diplomatic corps. The senseless murders in Libya are a reminder of the dangers these public servants take on every day and the courage that they show in furthering our diplomatic goals all across the globe. We are all so grateful to them, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the families of Ambassador Chris Stevens and the other victims of this attack. And I stand, as we all do, with the President in supporting efforts to secure those who continue to serve us abroad. Madam President, I have come to the floor today to respond to the statements that were made here earlier that are completely inaccurate about the bill that we are currently considering on the floor, the Veterans Job Corps bill. In particular, I want to respond to the baseless and frankly offensive charges that the senator from Oklahoma made, insinuating that supporters of this bill don't, quote, really care about veterans and that this bill, quote, isn't about veterans. Madam President, I have been working on veterans issues in the Senate for nearly 2 decades. And in all of that time, under Democratic and Republican-controlled Senates, under administrations of both parties, and in times of war and peace, if there was one issue I've seen that rises above the day-to-day bomb-throwing that often characterizes the debate here, it's been the care and benefits for our veterans. We can certainly disagree about policy, of course. We can fight with all of our hearts for what we think is right. But never, never have I seen accusations that one party or one group wasn't fighting for what they believed to be right for our veterans. In fact, the accusations leveled on the floor here earlier today were one of the biggest departures from the spirit of cooperation around veterans issues that I've seen in my time in the Senate. So I'm here today to set the record straight about the steps this bill takes to put our veterans back to work. And in doing so, I will not question the motives or the degree to which those who may oppose this legislation care for our veterans, because as chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee myself, I see Republicans' commitment every single day. I won't level allegations designed to make our veterans political pawns, and I certainly will not mislead anyone about what we have set out to do. I won't because, honestly, I believe our veterans deserve far better. What they and the American people deserve is the truth. And the truth is that caring for our veterans and helping to provide them with the training they need to find jobs when they return home is a cost of the war we have fought for the last decade. The truth is that less than 1% of U.S. citizens serve and sacrifice for the well-being of the other 99%. And the truth is that what the senator from Oklahoma calls a charade is an effort to give those veterans as many avenues as possible to find work. It's an effort to give them the economic security and self-esteem that only a job can provide and that is so essential to their return home. Now, I understand that it has taken some in the Senate a long time to come to grips with the fact that in our fiscal commitment to those who wear the commitment that we owe to those who wear the uniform does not end the day they are discharged. But the truth is, it's not enough to give our veterans a pat on the back for their military service. We also have to give them a helping hand into the job market today. And as the jobs report that was released last month reminds us, we have over 720,000 unemployed veterans across the nation, including over 225,000 veterans who served since September 11th. And despite what the senator from Oklahoma may have said, this bill makes the resources available to all of them. In fact, that is exactly why we brought this bill forward. What we need right now is an all-hands-on-deck, all-of-the-above strategy. That's why, in fact, that this bill includes both Democratic and Republican ideas. This is a bill that will increase training and hiring opportunities for all veterans using proven job training programs from across the country. For instance, it increases grants under the COPS and SAFER programs that we have seen work to train and hire qualified veterans to work as police officers, firefighters, and other first responders. Now, this is at a time when 85% of law enforcement agencies were forced to reduce their budgets last year. And it comes at a time when we face a $10 billion maintenance backlog for our public lands. This bill will help train and hire veterans to restore and protect our national, state, and tribal forests, our parks, and our other public lands. And because training and hiring our veterans has never been and should never be an effort that divides us, we have included a host of Republican ideas into this bill. We included a bill from Senator Toomey that gives veterans increased access to computers and internet tools to help them find jobs in in-demand areas in their own communities. We included a bill sponsored by Senator Bozeman that will increase transition assistance programs for eligible veterans and their spouses. And we included a very important provision from senators on both sides of the aisle that will help force our states to consider the military experience of our veterans when they issue licenses and certifications, something we have all heard when we go home. Now, we figured that this comprehensive, bipartisan approach would certainly be enough to gain Republican support, even if it did come, as we are, of course, inching closer to an election. But over the course of the last 48 hours or so, we've heard that Republicans, including Senator Burr, who is the ranking member of my committee, had an alternative version of the bill that Republicans wanted to push forward. Senator Burr's bill includes a system to have states certify military experience for job skills and helps veterans get hired into the federal workforce, among a number of other provisions. Now, it appeared to all of us that this late alternative might derail what I believe can be and ought to be a bipartisan effort. But again, Madam President, we are committed to making this a bipartisan effort. So instead of showing our veterans that we are just about gridlock and partisanship, here is what we have done. Because as I said before, this has to be an all-of-the-above approach. We have, therefore, added every one of the provisions in Senator Burr's alternative to our bill. And now I believe we have an even more bipartisan, more inclusive bill on the floor right now, waiting action. This is a bill that is paid for with offsets that both Republicans and Democrats have supported. And it is a bill unquestionably that represents ideas from both sides of the aisle, including now from the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. There is no reason now that Republicans should not join us in passing this bill and passing it quickly. Because, Madam President, this does not have to be an either-or situation. Neither party has the magic bullet to solve this problem. So we have to open as many proven opportunities to employment as we can. You know, veterans are out there watching and waiting. They are tired of excuses, and they certainly have no stomach for the kind of political posturing we saw earlier today that comes only at their expense. Now, I know some Republicans have pointed to the calendar as the reason for their opposition to this bill. And honestly, Madam President, I wish it wasn't September and we didn't have to deal with the silly season here in Washington, D.C. But, you know, who could care less about what month it is or how many days there are from an election? Here's the issue. Nearly 1 million unemployed veterans are looking for work today. They're concerned about what jobs are available in their community. Their concern is what training program they can take advantage of and what's being done to honor their 2 or 3 tours overseas. This is a bill now that offers them new resources to answer those questions. It is a bill that will help them serve their community and help them provide honorably for their families. I truly hope now, with the change that we have added to add Senator Burr's alternative to our overall bill, we'll have overcome the last hurdle before passage. And I would come to the floor today to urge Republicans to join us now in rising above politics, like we have done time and time again for our veterans. Ignore the calendar and the never-ending chatter about who's up and who's down. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure our veterans come first, this week and every week, and that we intend to keep our commitment to their service. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka. Mr. President.
Minnesota.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here to talk about the important Veterans Job Corps Act of 2012 that's on the floor of the Senate. But I did first want to express my thoughts, as so many of my colleagues have done on both sides of the aisle, that I strongly condemn the attacks in Egypt and Libya. I am deeply saddened by the death of our ambassador there, as well as several other American citizens. And I join all America, not only in condemning these attacks, but also in sending my prayers and thoughts to the families of those killed by these senseless and horrific acts of violence. On to the Veterans Jobs Corps Act, Mr. President, because as we all know, as we've seen by this horrific violence and by what we've seen overseas and in the Mideast, our troops face that every single day when they're there, as do our diplomats. They face that kind of threat. And when they come home to this country, we must treat them with great dignity and respect. I've always believed that when we ask our young men and women to fight in defense of our nation, we make a promise that we will give them the resources they need to complete their mission. We also promise to take care of them when they come home to this country. When they signed up to serve, there was no waiting line, and when they come home to the United States of America and they need a job or they need health care or they need an education, there should never be a waiting line in this country. As a senator from Minnesota, fighting for our veterans has been a major focus. While we don't have an active duty base, Mr. President, we have the 5th biggest National Guard in the country. Given that our population is only 22nd in the country, you can see that we have a lot of people who want to serve our country and sign up to serve on the front line. We have worked to cut through the red tape and streamline credentialing to help service members transition their military skills into good-paying jobs at home. To give just one example, right now returning paramedics are too often unable to count the medical training that they receive in the military towards receiving a license to become a civilian emergency medical technician. That's why I introduced the Veterans to Paramedics Act to fix that problem by encouraging states to give paramedics credit for the medical training that they've already received in the military. Not only does this help our veterans, Mr. President, it also helps relieve the shortage of emergency medical personnel, especially in our rural areas where we have seen those shortages. With common sense solutions like these, we can not only fulfill our commitment to our veterans, but we can also help lift our economy and make sure that people who have the skills fill the jobs that we have available. Mr. President, this is what the Veteran Jobs Corps Act is all about, fulfilling our promise to our veterans, ensuring them the training and the opportunities that they need to find good-paying jobs, and strengthening our nation in the process. To list just a few of the important provisions in this bill, first, the Veterans Jobs Corps Act gives veterans a new opportunity to serve and protect America by granting them prioritized placement in first responder positions like police, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians. Second, this bill would create conservation and resource management jobs for veterans, enlisting their help in building a stronger and more beautiful America through the restoration of our forests, parks, coasts, and public lands. Third, the Veterans Jobs Corps Act would establish a pilot program to provide veterans with access to the Internet and computers to assist in job searches, a key bipartisan provision first introduced by my colleagues across the aisle. And fourth, the Veteran Jobs Corps Act would especially help rural veterans find employment by granting them greater access to career specialists who can help them write resumes, prepare for interviews, and find jobs. We know all too often that this amazing experience and leadership experience they've had overseas fighting for our country does not always translate the terms and the words and the way it's described on a resume into really explaining what it is to a potential employer. That's why this skill training is so important. This would also allow eligible veterans and spouses to enroll in the military's innovative transition assistance program at sites outside military installations so that they can relocate or return home in pursuit of job opportunities. This is a key benefit in my state of Minnesota, as I noted. which is very rural and also has no military bases. The fact is that our returning veterans have battle-tested skills that are valuable to employers in all kinds of fields. This is something companies in my state have recognized. In fact, our business community, small and large, are already leading the way in reaching out to service members before they've even begun the process of transitioning home. In April of this year, when Minnesota's 34th Infantry Division, known as the Red Bulls, were still deployed in Kuwait, representatives from several major companies in Minnesota actually flew to Kuwait to help soldiers spruce up their resumes and prepare them for job interviews. Now all across Minnesota, large and small companies are targeting their recruitment efforts on returning service members. This is the type of initiative that we need. In recent months, the unemployment rate for Minnesota veterans who have served since 9/11 has hit nearly 23%, almost double the national average for vets of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. An unemployment rate that high among the men and women who have served and sacrificed for our nation is unacceptable, especially when our state's unemployment rate is in fact at 5.8%. But I truly believe that with initiatives like those launched by private sector companies in our state and with training programs like those created by this critical legislation, we're going to turn this situation around. That's why I'm calling on all my colleagues today to support the Veterans Job Corps Act. This important bill, which is fully paid for, goes a long way in providing our returning veterans the leg up they need in transitioning into the civilian workforce. Minnesota has always been a state that understands the debt we owe to the men and women who have served and sacrificed for us. I call on all of my colleagues to vote for this bill and to take a step towards fulfilling that debt. This is the least we can do for people, for our troops, for our soldiers who have fought to protect our values of freedom, democracy, and human rights. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. And I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.